9. Lime Tian Beach Resort. Located at Lime Tian Beach along the eastern shore of Thailand's Koh Tao Island, an old abandoned hotel stands as a reminder of the visitors who once flocked there to vacation in paradise. Nobody seems to know when or why the resort was abandoned. Rumors claim that it was never very successful because it was hard to get to, with only a narrow dirt road leading to it, and because the hotel was small, which limited the amount of money the owners could bring in at any given time. With a plethora of luxury resorts nearby at Danode Bay, Lime Tian Beach didn't seem to attract the crowd it needed in order to stay in business. The resort stopped welcoming guests in 2014, but some visitors have noticed that it seems like it's been deserted for much longer. Most of the property structures still stand and are in decent condition, despite being run down and covered in graffiti. Every few years, rumors swirl about plans to reopen the resort, but it hasn't happened yet. For now, it remains a popular attraction among urban explorers who are willing to travel out of their way to experience an off-the-beaten-path destination. 8. BGE Al Babas. Halfway between Turkey's largest city, Istanbul, and its capital city of Ankara, 732 pristine-looking miniature castle-like chalets sit on a hillside in various states of completion. None of them were ever finished. Construction on the unfinished settlement known as BGE Al Babas began in 2014. Each three-story chalet was designed to look identical on the outside, while allowing owners to customize the interiors. But this vision never came to fruition because the development company went bankrupt, and in 2019 the project was abandoned. All its investors pulled out, and the future of the site remains uncertain to this day. Plans to finish the homes and build a movie theater, Turkish bath and sports facilities appear to have fallen through. Over $200 million was poured into the project before it ground to a screeching halt, and the remaining few with interests at stake in the property can't seem to decide whether it would be riskier to push forward and finish what they started, or if they should accept failure and leave it alone for good. 7. Desert Training Center. Also known as the California-Arizona Maneuver Area, CAMA, the Desert Training Center, DTC, was a World War II-era military training facility that straddled the Sonoran and Mojave deserts. It opened in 1942 for the purpose of training U.S. Army and Air Force personnel how to survive and fight in the unforgiving desert environment. The remote site also functioned as an equipment testing ground and a tactical development facility, occupying an 18,000 square mile area that extended into California and Nevada. The DTC was one of, if not the largest military training ground in the history of strategized warfare. As its commanding general, George S. Patton Jr. was tasked with advancing desert tank warfare and ensuring that soldiers were ready for the harsh conditions they could expect to face in the North African campaign. The DTC consisted of various camps, which were located far enough apart from one another to train independently. There was even a secret camp known as Camp Baus, where military personnel worked to develop an ultra-bright tank-mounted light that would blind and disorient the enemy during nighttime battles. The project was ultimately abandoned, and Camp Baus closed in April 1944, around the same time the DTC shut down its operations. Today, the property remains covered in visible ruins and is filled with World War II-era relics, including tanks and other military vehicles, man-made reservoirs that once held water, crumbling sidewalks that once led to buildings but now lead to nowhere, crumbling churches and buildings, and unit insignias made from rocks that remain embedded in the ground. 6. Golo Island. 2 miles off the Croatian coast in the Adriatic Sea, there's a barren, desolate island that was once home to a top-secret Yugoslavian political prison, once described by its inmates as a living hell. Known as Golo Island, the island was an ideal location for isolating the prison population and avoiding the prying eyes of the public. Nicknamed the Croatian Alcatraz and Tito's Gulag, Golo Island operated as a prisoner and labor camp from 1949 to 1989. Only men were housed there, but female political prisoners experienced similarly dismal conditions at a prison on the nearby island of Sveti Kruga. Golo Island functioned specifically as a political prison until 1956. It was more or less a dumping ground for accused Stalinists, Soviet sympathizers, and anyone who spoke out against Yugoslavian dictator Josip Broz Tito. Inmates were worked nearly to death as they were forced to quarry tunnels and build the very fortifications that they languished in. They were also put through a so-called re-education regimen that involved severe punishment against anyone staff members even slightly suspected of being an enemy to Tito's regime. The horrors of Golo Island spread to the mainland, where civilians grew to live in constant fear of being taken away by the Yugoslavian secret police for saying or even doing the tiniest thing wrong. Prisoners who made it back to the mainland from Golo Island were terrified but silent, because they'd already lived to experience the horror and hoped to never go through it again. Do you think a place like this could be haunted? Let us know what you think in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. 5. Ciudad Real International Airport. Located 120 miles south of Madrid, the Ciudad Real International Airport operated for just 3 years, from 2009 to 2012. Planned and financed during the construction boom of the late 90s and early 2000s, it was Spain's first ever privately funded airport. It was meant to accommodate spillover from the overcrowded Madrid Barajas airport, but it never saw the kind of traffic its builders anticipated. By the time Ciudad Real finally opened, the global financial crisis of 2008 had taken hold. International flights to and from the airport didn't begin until 2010, and the only service that was ever offered was a Ryanair flight to and from London. Just 4 months later, the airline cancelled its service at the airport. Domestic flights continued until 2012, when the facility declared bankruptcy. Some critics speculated that the airport had been built solely to serve the construction industry's interests. Enough loans were taken out to cover the costs of building the site, but nobody invested the necessary funds to turn it into a functioning business. Today, the defunct airport sits mostly abandoned, functioning primarily as a storage facility and for pilot training. It has one of Europe's largest runways, measuring 13,500 feet. 4. Bayantan. In the middle of the Gobi Desert in southern Mongolia, roughly 19 miles from the nearest town, lies a sprawling, abandoned Soviet airbase called Bayantan. With an entry point marked by a crumbling archway, the massive property contains old barracks, aircraft hangars, monuments, supply depots, an overgrown 2-mile-long runway, and other decaying Cold War-era structures. Bayantan operated from the 1970s until sometime during the 1990s as a first line of defense against a potential invasion from China. Like many similar sites, it was permanently shuttered when the Soviet Union fell. Today, what's left of Bayantan looks as though it was abandoned much earlier than it actually was. Concrete is crumbling, metal is rusting, and overgrowth has reclaimed spaces where it was once cleared for man-made fixtures. Most of the building's doorways have been sealed off or blocked by deliberately collapsed staircases to prevent squatters from getting inside. In 2013, a group of explorers managed to get inside one of the apartment buildings, where they found garbage and evidence of fires left behind by past squatters. They also found remnants from previous legal residents, including layers of wallpaper and old Soviet newspapers. Nomadic families are known to occasionally set up camp in between the buildings, while allowing their cattle to graze among the ruins. Bayantan is just one of several abandoned Soviet bases throughout Mongolia. During their heyday, the areas surrounding these bases consisted mostly of military personnel and their families. When the Iron Curtain fell in the early 90s, these sites suddenly became ghost towns, with populations that were once well into the 6-digit range dwindling to just thousands or less. 3. Gusanville VI. During its heyday, the Parisian suburb of Gusanville VI was considered a desirable place to live. Home to 144 families, it was close to the city but retained a quaint old town charm, making it feel like an entire world away. Residents had almost everything they needed right in the town, including shops, cafes, a church, and even a weekend farmers market which drew customers from outside the village. Things took a turn for the worse in 1973 when a prototype for a Soviet supersonic jet crashed into the town during the Paris Air Show. The accident destroyed 15 houses and a school and killed 8 residents, as well as the plane's crew. A year later, Charles de Gaulle International Airport opened nearby. The airport is so close to Gusanville, the neighborhood is considered part of the runway approach. Low-flying planes passed over the town day and night, causing unbearable noise and rattling the historic brick homes. Almost all of Gusanville's residents moved within a year of the airport's openings. Some were so eager to leave, they didn't even bother to sell their homes first. The airport bought 100 of the vacant houses in exchange for agreeing to take care of them, but the contract was never enforced. There are a few residents left, but the ghost town consists mostly of abandoned squares, overgrown yards, and decrepit, boarded-up, graffiti-covered homes with broken windows. Some houses have been demolished, but many still stand despite their sad state. Because the village church is a protected property, nothing near it can be destroyed, sparing a good portion of the town from the wrecking ball. The activity that once filled the town has been replaced with an eerie silence, punctuated by the occasional deafening noise of commercial jets passing overhead. Some of the last holdouts who refused to leave Gusanville have tried to revive it in recent years, and the population has increased slightly, but the homes need millions of dollars worth of renovations, making it unlikely that the settlement will ever be restored to its former glory. 2. Edinburgh Manor. During the 19th century, public officials in Jones County, Iowa, commissioned the construction of a county poor farm in Edinburgh using federal grant money. It was one of many sites of its kind throughout the US, which functioned as places where poor and unemployed people could work in exchange for food and shelter. Its planners minced no words in the original description, which states that the county poor farm was a comfortable retreat for lazy, able-bodied, and willingly dependent applicants. In reality, places like these became catch-alls for people who'd fallen victim to an array of social problems, including those in need of mental health treatment and others who were physically disabled and could not perform traditional work. And while it was, in theory, supposed to be a safe haven for its residents, the poor farm was overcrowded and dangerous. At least 150 people died there throughout its operating years, which lasted from 1850 to 1910, after which point it was demolished. It was replaced by the 12,000 square foot building that stands today, known as Edinburgh Manor. The new facility functions similarly to the poor farm, housing both men and women who were down on their luck, as well as the elderly, disabled, and mentally ill. Over time, new social programs were implemented, offering people alternatives to poor houses. By the early 2000s, there were only 20 to 40 people still living at Edinburgh Manor. It was completely abandoned by 2011, when a private company bought the property with plans to turn it into a bed and breakfast. Structural safety concerns stopped that from happening, and Edinburgh Manor remains empty to this day. It's now owned by a couple who are dedicated to preserving its history. They say the building is haunted by the ghosts of crime victims, and visitors seem to agree. Either way, the site is spooky, with medical equipment, furniture, and the personal belongings of past residents serving as a testament to the less fortunate who went to Edinburgh Manor when they had nowhere else to go. 1. The Court of Mysteries. In a populated residential neighborhood in Santa Cruz, California, there's a dirty and dilapidated collection of buildings occupying 4 lots. The collection of structures includes a strange-looking fence and 2 towers, along with a gate topped by a mystical-looking silver triangle. Locals have countless nicknames for the home, including the Yogi Temple, the Brick Castle, the Gate of Prophecy, and the Unorthodox Chapel, just to name a few. But the property's official name is the Court of Mysteries, and it sat abandoned for decades. The main house was built during the 1930s by a bricklayer named Kenneth Kitchen, whose architectural designs were inspired by his interest in the occult and Hindu iconography. According to legend, he built almost exclusively at night. His reasons for doing so are unknown, but it's believed that he may have had spiritual reasons, or that he was simply trying to avoid trouble from inspectors and get around the requirement for a building permit. Kitchen supposedly slept in a yogi shack on the property and never actually lived in the main house, and neither's anyone else. He sold the property sometime during the 1940s or 50s and left the area, and more or less vanished from official records after that. The new owner was a priest whose church transferred him out of state in 1963, and the house was left abandoned for decades. Many locals considered the Court of Mysteries to be an eyesore, and it was even slated for demolition at one point, but was saved by activists who saw historic value in it. It was eventually bought by new owners with the intention of caring for and reviving it as a tourist destination, but it was sold to yet another buyer in late 2021 for $3.9 million. Thanks for watching. Which one of these places would you be willing to visit? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye.